Welcome to my channel. It was Friday, and I had left the hangar earlier than usual. The guys had things to wrap up, and once they finished, they'd probably call it a day, since I was already gone. I looked forward to an evening with my wonderful wife Zoe. We'd known each other nearly 6 years and had been married for 3.5. Both of us were 29. Lately, things had felt a bit distant between us, and for the past month or so, she seemed somewhat preoccupied. So, I decided to go all out to make tonight special. I picked up a couple of fine bottles of wine, 2 ribeye steaks from the butcher, and rosés from the florist rather than the supermarket. My plan was to light candles and hopefully understand what had been on her mind. I wanted to remind her how much I loved her and, with any luck, share a quiet night together. I got home well before Zoe and ensured everything was perfect. I tidied up the house, put fresh sheets on the bed, and placed candles in the bedroom. I set the dining table in the kitchen with our best silverware and napkins. After uncorking a bottle of wine to let it breathe, I set the roses by the front door so she'd notice them right away. Their scent was one of her favorites. I prepared the potatoes for my signature scalloped potatoes. Thinly sliced potatoes, lightly drizzled with olive oil, seasoned with salt, pepper, and a hint of rosemary, with a sprinkle of mustard powder to add a perfect touch to the steaks. Everything was in place, and I was pleased with how it turned out. All I had to do now was wait for the love of my life to come home, so I could show her how much she meant to me. I hoped the night would set a wonderful tone for the whole weekend. As I was arranging the potato slices on the baking sheet and the oven preheated, I heard the front door open. Zoe's voice called out, "Richard, are you home?" Odd, I thought. My car was parked right out front, and the roses by the door should have made it clear I was here. I was just sprinkling the rosemary on the potatoes when I overheard her say, "All right, we got here first. Let's sit on the couch. It'll be easier if he's standing when we tell him." "Tell me what?" I wondered, stepping into the living room. There was Zoe, clearly shocked, along with a man whose face I instantly recognized. He was the new deputy head of HR, whom Zoe had mentioned frequently over the last few months. Tall, about 180 mass, fit, blonde, handsome, and with a hint of arrogance. My confusion must have shown on my face as he extended his hand nonchalantly and introduced himself. "Hey, Dick, I'm Gerald." In a daze, I shook his hand, feeling the strength of his grip, which stopped just shy of crushing my own. What a jerk! I stood there as he smirked, and Zoe finally spoke up. "Richard, we need to talk." Was he joining us for dinner? I could defrost another steak if Gerald wanted to stay. But she continued, "I'm spending the weekend with Gerald. Just one weekend." I hadn't anticipated that. "What?" I asked, shocked. Gerald stepped forward as if to reassure me. "It'll be good for you. I'll teach her things you can only dream of, and you'll enjoy being with her more afterward. It's only for a weekend, and she won't do anything like this again. Not ever." I was finally starting to shake off the initial shock. "If she does, I'll divorce her," I replied firmly. Gerald walked closer, looking down at me, his tone turning threatening. "No, you won't. And you won't be able to stop me." He leaned in and continued in that same menacing voice. "You can't stop me, but if you file for divorce, I guarantee you'll be unable to walk without pain from that day forward. Your choice." He then returned to Zoe's side, smiling smugly. "She'll spend the weekend with me, I'll teach her a lot, and when she comes back, I won't be with her again. She'll stay loyal to you from now on, right, sweetheart?" He looked at Zoe with a ridiculous term of endearment, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Still stunned, I gathered myself enough to ask, "So, have you two already been together?" I guessed as much from the way he called her sweetheart. "No, that would be cheating," Zoe insisted. "And this isn't?" I muttered, trying to process it all. "Do you want a drink?" Zoe offered, trying to play it off. "I'll get it myself," I replied, irritated. Gerald placed a hand on her shoulder, saying, "Give him a minute, sweetheart. He needs time to take it all in. We've been discussing this for weeks, and we just dropped it on him in a few minutes. He'll come around. They always do." "It's good to see you again, Gerald," but we both felt it. Our friendship, though this one wasn't something we'd been forced to make, it had been something we'd wanted to make for a very long time. It was one. And why did he keep calling her sweetheart? It made my blood boil. In the kitchen, I saw the open bottle of wine and poured myself a glass, taking a large gulp. But wine wasn't strong enough for this situation. I stormed into the garage where I kept my beer fridge, nearly tearing the door off as I opened it and grabbed a bottle of Old Crafty Hen. Slamming the door shut, I thought to myself, what a pair of fools. I looked around for a bottle opener, but didn't want to go back inside until I'd gathered my thoughts. Using a trick I learned in the army, I placed the bottle cap on a sharp corner of the workbench and hit it hard from above. The cap flew off, landing somewhere nearby, but I didn't care. My mind raced, trying to decide how to handle this. Gradually, I calmed down, thinking things over until a plan began to take shape. I walked to the other end of the garage, opened a cabinet, and took out what I needed, tucking it into my back pocket. I finished the beer, grabbed another, and headed back to the kitchen, this time opening the bottle properly with an opener. I prepared something else as well. The largest knife from the block, which I slid into the back of my pants, along with the other item. It was purely for effect. I had no intention of getting myself thrown in jail. With a renewed sense of confidence, I took a deep breath and returned to the living room. There they were, the pair of cheaters, sitting on my couch, holding hands. As I walked in, they quickly let go and shuffled apart. Good, it seemed I'd gained a slight edge. They were waiting for me, so I pulled out my phone and tossed it onto the coffee table, making it very obvious that it was recording. Gerald, noticing my anger, stood up, spreading his arms. "Listen, buddy, it's just one weekend," he said, which only irritated me more. A jerk like him would never be my buddy. He glanced at my phone. "I see you're recording this. That's fine, but you know what'll happen if you post it on social media. The pain you'll feel won't come close to the agony of having both your legs broken," he said coldly. "I'm recording this for my own protection, and oddly enough, for yours and hers too," I replied calmly. "And don't even think about reporting this at work. As deputy head of HR, I handle all complaints and I have connections who'll alert me if anyone tries to bypass me. It's not about what you know, it's who you know. Understand?" "I get it," I responded seriously, locking eyes with him, "but I have a suggestion on how we can settle this," I said, to which he only smirked, exuding arrogance. Gesturing toward the recording phone, I added, "For the record, tell me what exactly you plan to do with my wife." He puffed himself up with pride. "I'm taking your wife for the weekend, showing her things she's never experienced. She'll learn new and exciting ways to please each of us. Then she'll return to you with skills you've been missing out on. Probably won't even walk straight until the next weekend," he chuckled. I didn't believe a word of his nonsense. "And after that," I asked, "she'll come back to you after experiencing the best time of her life, but she promised me she'd stay loyal to you forever. She'll show you new techniques that'll blow your mind." I looked over at Zoe. "Zoe, is this what you want?" "Yes, Richard," she pleaded. "It's just one weekend, and after that I promise to be faithful to you." Turning to Gerald, I continued, "And what if she doesn't keep her promise? Just like when she vowed to be faithful at our wedding. What if she cheats again? Are you going to intimidate her the way you're trying to do with me? Or what if someone better than you comes along?" My voice dripped with sarcasm, which seemed lost on him as he looked puzzled. "She promised me she'll stay loyal to you after this weekend." "Sure, like I believe anything she says right now. Here's what we're gonna do. I'll fight you for her." He was taller and broader than me, maybe a bit younger, but he just smiled, full of arrogance. "If that's what you want, we can handle it now. No sense wasting the weekend," he replied confidently. "I'm in," I said, noticing Zoe cover her mouth the way she does when nervous. "Two men fighting over me? How thrilling," she muttered, a spark of excitement in her eyes. I looked her way and growled, "I'm not fighting for you. You're not worth it. I'm fighting for my self-respect." Her excitement vanished, and her expression turned serious. Looking back at him, I stated, "If I win, you're gone. You'll leave and never speak to her again, not even at work. If you win, you get the weekend with her, and I won't divorce her. But there are conditions." His smug look persisted. "All right, let's hear them," he replied. "First one to land on his back loses. No knives, no weapons, and no police involvement," I said. He nodded, still smirking. "Fine. No cops." "Do you have any knives?" he sneered. In response, I pulled a 30C butcher's knife from my waistband and set it on the coffee table, watching his eyes widen. "I suppose you've got a gun, too?" he asked, still trying to maintain his smirk. With a slight grin, I reached behind me and pulled out an air pistol, an exact replica of a real firearm. I didn't know if he recognized guns, but it looked authentic enough to give him pause. His confidence faltered, though he tried not to show it. "I'm gonna knock you down before I put you on your back," he threatened. "Do your worst, you fool. Remember the rules. No weapons, no cops, and no knives. Everything else is fair game." He scoffed. "Ha, I'm not an idiot. I get it. You'll pay for this, and maybe I'll keep her for a week. If I win, at least I'll respect myself for defending my marriage," I replied. "I won't be ashamed every time I look in the mirror." Suddenly, Zoe seemed to realize things weren't going as she'd planned. She looked distressed, probably recognizing my serious resolve from the past. "No, Richard, I don't want this anymore. Gerald, leave now." She tried to stop us, but I growled, "Too late, sweetheart. You started this with him weeks ago, and I'm finishing it here and now. Record it. I need proof." She began crying, realizing she'd lost control of the situation. I gestured toward the kitchen door. "After you," I said to Gerald. He led the way through the kitchen to the back door, where I grabbed a few supplies. As soon as he stepped outside, I kicked him in the back, sending him face first into the flower bed. He scrambled up, glaring at me with rage. I just smiled. "No rules," I said. Technically untrue, but I wanted to make a point. His fury was exactly what I needed, further tilting the power in my favor. It would have been great if he'd fallen on his back right away, but I hadn't expected that. He swung his right fist at me, telegraphing it so slowly I blocked it with ease. Then I threw the contents of my right hand, salt, pepper, rosemary, and mustard powder, into his face. He clutched his face, screaming in pain. I tried to push him onto his back, but he managed to step back. He lowered his hands, glaring at me through teary eyes, snot streaming from his nose. I moved forward and punched him in the stomach as hard as I could. He doubled over but didn't fall. Now, with one hand on his stomach and the other on his face, I kneed him in the groin with all my strength. He collapsed onto his knees, retching, his hands unable to cover all the areas that hurt. I tried to push him onto his back, but he resisted, so I punched him square in the face. He wobbled on his knees but still didn't fall over. My right fist then connected with his nose, and blood sprayed everywhere. Damn, that had to hurt. You don't see pain like that on TV. I slapped him hard across the face, his head snapping back, then followed it up with a backhand. That was a mistake, as my hand throbbed with pain. Leaning close to him, I whispered, "You can end this any time. All you have to do is lie on your back." As I lifted my hand again, his legs gave way, causing him to collapse onto his side and roll onto his back. The balance of power had decisively shifted in my favor. I looked over at Zoe, noticing tears streaming down her face, though I couldn't decipher the reason behind them. Grabbing Gerald by the hair, I pulled him to his feet without an ounce of gentleness. Opening the gate to our garden, I told him, "Remember this, you are never to speak to her again. Coward. If the police show up, this will be nothing in comparison." I pushed him through the gate and closed it firmly behind him. The unpleasant smell confirmed he'd soiled himself. Zoe continued recording the entire scene. "Send me a copy of that video," I said as I walked past her into the kitchen, where I washed my hands. At least Gerald would carry the scent of rosemary from what I'd thrown on him earlier. Heading upstairs, Zoe followed as I took a suitcase from the spare bedroom. I began packing her underwear from the drawer into the suitcase. "What are you doing?" she asked, watching me. "I'm yours," she said, as I continued to pack her belongings. "We agreed I wouldn't divorce you if I lost, but as you noted, I won, which means I'm divorcing you. I suggest you go stay with your parents." I carried the suitcase downstairs, opened the front door, and tossed it outside. Picking up my phone, I dialed her mother's number. "Hello, Richard. This is a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you?" "Mary, would you kindly come pick up your daughter? I'm divorcing her." With that, I ended the call. I then sent her the audio recording of Gerald, boasting about his weekend plans with her, and she responded that it was exactly what she wanted. After that, I powered off my phone, took Zoe by the hand, led her outside, and locked the door behind her. Ignoring her knocking, I waited until it ceased. I expected the police to visit, but they never did. Perhaps Gerald was too humiliated to admit he'd been beaten by someone smaller than himself. It didn't matter. I spent Saturday going through Zoe's belongings and calculating finances. When my grandparents passed, the house was left to my sister and me. I took out a small mortgage to buy her half, so I'd likely need to reimburse Zoe for her contributions. I edited the video and audio clips, sending them to every email address I could locate at Zoe's workplace. People like Gerald likely accumulated enemies along the way, and I trusted they would ensure this reached HR. On Sunday morning, Zoe's father came by to pick up the rest of her belongings. He looked at me and asked if there was any way I could, but my expression must have conveyed my answer before I finished. We shook hands and he left. I suspect Zoe's parents helped the divorce proceed smoothly. It's been just over 4 months since I filed for divorce. On a Saturday afternoon, while I was cleaning my air guns in the garage in preparation for a shooting competition the next day, the doorbell rang. I was about to get up when I heard, "It's okay, I'll get it." Clara, who helps keep my house in order, appeared at the garage door. "There's a lady at the door who says she's your wife, about 170 CE tall, blonde, around 30, maybe a bit older. I've put the kettle on and left her in the living room." I walked to the living room and found Zoe there. She looked well-groomed, but seemed about 5 years older, with a worn appearance. This was the first time I'd seen her since I'd sent her away. "What do you want? I've been paying you the agreed amount for the house." She looked at me and said, "Richard, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. He convinced me, promised everything would be fine, and told me that if you truly loved me, you'd let me go through with it. He seemed so convincing. He even had one of the girls explain how it had worked out for her." "Is that other girl still married?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Zoe hesitated. "I don't know. I don't work there anymore. After everyone got the recordings, I was so ashamed. No one wanted to talk to me, so I had to leave." I continued, "Are you still seeing Gerald?" "No," she replied. "I never intended to. He kept his word and never contacted me again, but he didn't last long. He missed several days of work, and eventually they kicked him out. Rumor has it another husband beat him up, though it wasn't me. When I dragged him to the back gate, I warned him, and although the police never came, I kept looking over my shoulder, avoiding dark places. He's not a good man. Decent men don't sleep with others' wives. Please, Richard, can we start over? I love you and I thought it was for your own good, but I'm sorry. It was a mistake and I never should have done it. Clara entered with a tray of tea, cups, and some biscuits, setting it on the coffee table. You might want to let it steep for a while, she said, then left the room. Zoe watched her leave. Or have you already found someone to replace me? That's Clara. She cleans here once a week. She works at the hangar and I'm too busy to do it myself. I even took out an extra mortgage just to pay you. So, is there any chance? She asked, pleading. I poured myself some tea, took a sip and found it weak. I should have waited, just as Clara suggested. It's been nearly 4 months without a word from you. You haven't contested the divorce, so why now? She looked down, embarrassed. I know I made a terrible mistake. I wanted to give you time, hoping you'd miss me, and I needed to gather the courage. My mom said if you loved me, you'd give me another chance. Dad thinks I'm wasting my time, but I had to try. Please, Richard. I took another sip of tea as Clara entered with a tray of cleaning supplies and went upstairs. I'll just head upstairs to tidy up. There's nothing in your room I shouldn't see, right? She teased with a soft laugh. I hope you've hidden all your bondage gear. I hope you've hidden all your bondage gear. Without waiting for a reply, she ran up the stairs. I glanced at Zoe. That's her joke, you know. We never got into anything like that. Maybe we should have, but you never wanted to try anything beyond the ordinary. Except with that fool. Even trying doggy style was too much for you. Zoe looked at me, but I didn't respond. I was still frustrated with her, though I held back. What do you expect me to think? You dropped a bombshell on me, saying you wanted to spend the weekend with another man. You'd planned it for weeks, but only gave me 2 minutes to decide, threatening me with violence if I didn't agree. You seemed thrilled by the thought of 2 men fighting over you, hoping he would win so you could have a weekend of passion, then return as if everything could be normal. But to me, that would have become the new normal, where I'd never measure up to him. Yes, I was thrilled when I thought you 2 would fight over me. She admitted. But then, I saw you pull out a knife in your air gun. That's when I realized I'd made a mistake. That Gerald would never stand a chance? I didn't want you ending up in jail because I put you in that situation. I'm really sorry, Zoe. I loved you so deeply, but that love died when you told me you wanted to be with him. For weeks, you'd been so distant and quiet, and I kept wondering what was wrong. Tried to make you happy. Now I know. It was because you planned to be with that jerk. I'd even prepared a special dinner. Bought flowers. I was right there with you, but you chose to listen to him instead. You didn't talk to me. You forced my hand with threats. How can you do that to someone you say you love? I'll never be able to trust you again. Being around you just hurts. She didn't touch her tea. I think it's time for you to go, I told her. She stood up, heading to the front door. I opened it for her, and she looked back, saying, I love you. I'm truly sorry, but I understand. I threw one last line at her. Remember the woman who told you about Gerald? That was Karen Prescott. Soon she'll be Karen Jones again. Her husband's making her take back her maiden name. She walked off in tears, and I didn't watch where she went. I wondered how Clara was doing upstairs. I headed up and noticed my bedroom door open. Entering, I unbuttoned my shirt and tossed it to the floor. Clara would probably scold me for that later, but I didn't care. As I entered the room, I saw Clara lying on the bed, the blanket pulled back, wearing black stockings and a grin. Couldn't find your bondage gear? She said. That's because I don't have any. Too bad, she replied. I would have liked to try it. By now, I was down to just my underwear. I went to the bathroom, grabbed the belt from my robe and returned, saying, This should do. Let's try it, she said, turning around and placing her hands behind her back. I quickly tied them, laid her on her back, and positioned myself between her stocking-clad thighs. Nearly an hour later, Clara lay with her head resting on my shoulder, one leg still in her black stocking draped over mine. Looking up at me, she said, I ought to thank Zoe, but I can't be grateful for the hurt she caused you. It'd be like thanking her for causing you pain. She smiled and added, when your divorce is final and I move in for good, we'll have to try that tying up again. This was the first time she'd mentioned moving in permanently, but I didn't object. As we drifted off to sleep, I heard Clara murmur, I want to learn everything Zoe never did. We fell into a peaceful sleep. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and those you love. Goodbye.